All right, so let's dive into this AI world you're so curious about. You sent her a really, really interesting mix of articles and notes, and it's clear that you're interested in going deeper than just like the techie side of things. You really want to get into how AI is impacting our lives,
Yeah.
like right now, the good, the bad, and especially the ethically tricky stuff. So we're going to do a deep dive into 3 specific areas where AI is already making waves: warfare, elections, and even personal relationships.
It really is remarkable how AI has transitioned. I mean, it's gone from science fiction to actually shaping our present. It seems
Mhm.
like every day AI is making headlines, and we're all trying to grasp what this really means
Yeah.
and, the implications for the future and all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And, speaking of headlines,
Hmm.
the situation in Ukraine is a perfect example of how AI is changing warfare as we know it. They're using AI-powered drones there,
Yeah.
but we're not talking about like your everyday remote-controlled toys. These drones use AI to analyze images,
Hmm.
pinpoint targets, and they can even make the decision to attack on their own, once given the go-ahead by a human, of course.
Yeah, it's a huge shift in how wars are being fought. I mean, think about it. Autonomous drones could potentially change what it even means to be a soldier. I mean, some of
Yeah.
these drones, they can even coordinate attacks in swarms. It's like something out of a movie. Achieving these super complex objectives that would be impossible for humans to manage, in real time.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing,
Yeah.
but also a little bit unnerving, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, imagine machines making life or death decisions without a human directly pulling the trigger. It raises so many questions about responsibility.
Absolutely. Like if an AI-powered drone makes a mistake, harm civilians, whatever, who is accountable? Is it the programmer? The military commander? And how do you even start to figure out rules of engagement for a kind of warfare that's, well, autonomous? The international community is,
Yeah.
trying to figure all of this out right now.
It's like we're living in a sci-fi movie, but it's real, and the consequences are very, very real. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to something closer to home for a lot of us: elections. We're in the middle of the U.S. presidential election right now, and AI is playing a really interesting kind of dual role. I mean, it can help with things like voter engagement, but it can also be used to spread a lot of misinformation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One thing that really jumps out from the stuff you sent over is deepfakes. These AI-generated videos are so real that they can make it look like anyone is saying or doing anything, and they spread online so quickly. Like, remember that fake celebrity endorsement that went viral? That's exactly what we're talking about. It can
Yeah.
really mislead voters.
Yeah, it's really concerning. I mean, how are voters supposed to tell what's real anymore? It's like we all need to become digital detectives or something, always questioning what we see online.
You know, media literacy is so important these days. We need to understand how these deepfakes are made so we can at least try to spot the signs of manipulation. It's like we're in an arms race, right? Tech companies are trying to develop AI tools to detect these fakes. But then the people making the fakes, they just get better and better, too.
It makes you wonder if we'll ever really be able to stay ahead of the game. Okay. This kind of brings us to AI's impact on something deeply personal: our relationships.
There's a case that you highlighted in your notes that is just so thought-provoking. A mother in Florida is suing a chatbot company because her son, who had developed a really close bond with an AI character, ended up taking his own life.
That's just heartbreaking. It really shows how AI isn't just some abstract concept anymore. It can have a profound impact on our lives and even our mental well-being.
This case is forcing us to think about the ethics of AI design, especially with platforms like Character.ai, where you can literally have conversations with AI that seems incredibly human. While these kinds of interactions can offer comfort to some people, there's also the potential for them to lead to unhealthy dependence. It's like blurring the lines between a real connection
Yeah.
and a virtual one.
Yeah, especially for
Yeah.
like more vulnerable users, like
Yeah.
teenagers, for example, who might be more inclined to confide in AI and form these really strong attachments.
Exactly. And that's where the question of regulation comes in. Should there be safeguards in place, especially for young people? How do we balance innovation in this space with the need to protect users? This goes way beyond just the technology itself. It's about human psychology and responsibility.
Yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot more to discuss
Yeah.
about how this technology is shaping who we are and how we relate to each other.
Yeah, it really is like we're entering this whole new territory, you know?
Right.
I mean, we've always thought about AI in terms of like, practical applications, automating tasks, that kind of thing. But now it's starting to touch something way deeper, our need for human connection.
It is, you're right. And in fact,
Yeah.
some of the stuff you send over actually talks about how people are forming these,
Yeah.
genuine emotional attachments to these AI characters, like they're forming real bonds
Yeah.
with these virtual entities, even though they know logically that they aren't human.
Exactly. And that's what makes the ethical side of this so important. If people are starting to become emotionally dependent on these AI companions, then we really have to start talking about the responsibility of the developers who are
Yeah.
creating these systems.
So it's like, can AI be too human? Can it be so good at mimicking human interaction
Yeah.
that it actually becomes harmful?
That's a question philosophers have been debating for years. But now it's not just theoretical anymore. I mean, it's having real world consequences, like the case in Florida we were just talking about. That's a powerful reminder that even though AI companions aren't sentient, they can still have a huge impact on our emotional well-being.
It's complex, isn't it? There aren't any easy answers. I mean, on one hand, AI companions could be really beneficial for people
Mm.
who are isolated or lonely.
Oh, for sure. But we also can't ignore the potential downsides. Like there's a real risk of addiction, unhealthy
Yeah.
dependence, and, just blurring the lines between reality and this kind of simulated world.
So then how do we draw that line? How do we encourage innovation
Mm.
while also making sure that we're protecting users, especially the more vulnerable ones?
Well, I think a good place to start is transparency. Like users need to be fully aware that they're interacting with AI, not a human, no deception, no pretending that these characters have real feelings or consciousness.
Okay, so
Yeah.
no more blurring the lines, right?
Yeah.
It should always be clear to the user that they're engaging with a piece of software, even if it's very sophisticated. What else?
Responsibility. Developers have a moral obligation to think about the potential impact of what they're creating. Like, they need to anticipate the risks and build in safeguards. Things like age restrictions, content moderation, maybe even mechanisms to detect if a user is becoming overly dependent on the AI.
So it's about building those safety nets right from the start.
Absolutely. And being transparent about those safety nets too. Let users know how the system works
Right.
and what measures are in place to protect them, because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah, it seems like transparency and responsibility are really key themes in this whole conversation.
For sure.
It's about approaching this new world of AI with our eyes wide open and a real sense of accountability.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle: education. We need to educate the public, especially young people, about AI, how it works, its limitations, the potential risks involved in interacting with it.
So it's not just about teaching people how to use AI, but also how to think critically about it.
Exactly. We need a generation of AI literate citizens who can engage with this technology thoughtfully and responsibly.
Which actually ties back to what we were talking about earlier with media literacy and AI-generated misinformation.
It all connects.
It's becoming more and more crucial to be able to think critically,
Yeah.
analyze information, and really separate fact from fiction.
Oh, absolutely. Those critical thinking skills are essential, especially in a world where AI can make it so hard to tell what's real and what's not. The ability to discern, to question, to not just take everything at face value, those are the skills we need to be teaching.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. You know, we have this incredible technology with the potential to do so much good in the world, but also the potential to be misused or even cause harm.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance, harnessing the power of AI while also minimizing the risks.
And it sounds like that balance depends on transparency, responsibility, and education.
You got it. Oh, and I'd add one more crucial ingredient to that mix: dialogue.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that. Dialogue. Okay, so how do you see that? How does dialogue play a role in shaping the future of AI?
Well, it's about having these open and honest conversations, about AI. We need to be talking about what it means for society, the ethical questions it brings up, and how we want to steer its development. This can't just be a conversation happening, in Silicon Valley or in government agencies.
Right, it needs to be a much broader societal discussion. Developers, policymakers, educators, ethicists, and most importantly, the public. Everyone needs to have a voice at the table.
I completely agree. AI isn't some far-off thing anymore. It's here. It's happening now. And it's impacting all of us. We need to be active in shaping where it goes, not just sitting back and letting it happen to us.
Absolutely. We can't just be passive bystanders. We need to be engaged in how AI is developed. And making sure that it aligns with, our values as a society.
Exactly. And thinking back to that example of AI in warfare, the implications are huge. It's just changing the whole nature of conflict, moving away from like a physical battlefield and into something more abstract and digital.
Yeah, and with those changes come a lot of really tough ethical and legal questions, like we were saying before. If an autonomous drone makes a mistake and harms civilians, Who's responsible? It's not so easy to just say it was the soldier who launched it.
Right, because now you're dealing with these complex algorithms, machine learning processes that are often hard to understand, even for the people who design them. That's why it's so important to establish some kind of international norms and standards, for how these autonomous weapons are developed and used.
It's almost like we need a whole new set of rules for this new era of warfare, like a digital Geneva Convention or something. And it's encouraging that, at least from what I've seen. The international community is starting to have these conversations.
They are, yeah. There's definitely a growing awareness that we need to get ahead of this technology before it gets out of control. I mean, can you imagine AI making life or death decisions on a battlefield with little to no human oversight? That's kind of a scary thought.
It is. It's a future we definitely want to avoid. But the good news is we have a choice. We have the power to shape the future of AI and make sure it's used for good.
I agree.
And that's where education comes in. And dialogue. We need to keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep having these conversations about what AI means for us ethically.
It's not going away. It's only going to get more powerful and more integrated into our lives.
Right. So it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create with it.
Exactly. I mean, do we want a future where AI is helping us solve problems, making the world a better place? Or do we want a future where it's making things worse, increasing inequality, eroding our privacy, fueling more conflict?
Yeah, it's our choice. And it's a choice we have to make together. Through open dialogue and collaboration. We need to make sure that our values, our ethics, our humanity are at the center of this whole conversation about AI.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive. It's clear that we're just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding AI, both its potential and its risks.
It really has. And to you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights. And maybe even spark some new questions. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep engaging in this conversation about how we can create a future with AI that benefits everyone.
Because ultimately, the future of AI is tied to the future of humanity. So let's work together to make sure it's a future we can all be proud of.